And less than a month after Harry and Meghan Markle's 6-hour Netflix series. Did you watch it? I didn't. Lobbed. A fresh round of accusations have come out against his family. Yes, that's right. There's more. And Harry is doing not one, but two sit-down interviews with 60 Minutes in America and ITV in the UK to sell. Have a look ahead of the book of his lost spare. Next week, we're told.
Never needed to be this way. The leaking and the planting. I want a family, not an institution. They feel as though it's better to keep us somehow as the villains. They've shown absolutely no willingness to reconcile. The time I've tried to do it privately, there have been briefings and leakings and planting of stories against me and my wife. And that correspondent will literally be spoon-fed information and write the story. And then at the bottom of it, they will say that they've reached out to Buckingham Palace for comment. But the whole story is Buckingham Palace commenting. So when we're being told for the last 6 years, we can't put a statement out to protect you, but you do it for other members of the family, there becomes a point when silence is betrayal.
Tell you what, men will do anything to avoid going to therapy, including 60-minute interviews. And I'll tell you what, the interviews and the book are likely to be explosive and likely deepen the rift with Harry's older brother, William. Take a listen to the teasers for the interviews. So we've already heard that, so let's instead talk to Russell Myers, who is royal editor at the Daily Mirror. Russell, thank you so much for joining us here, and I've got to ask, just how damaging do you expect these interviews and the book to be to the royal family?
Well, good evening, James. Well, first of all, I love your exuberance because I think a lot of people are feeling like it's Groundhog Day with Harry, sort of bemoaning his previous life with the royal family. But here we are. I mean, just weeks after the Netflix special 6 hours of him and Meghan, giving their version of events, we have another 2 promos just days before this book is coming out, and I definitely do think it will be explosive because people on the inside who know the ghostwriter, J.R. Mowringer, know that it will be very, very searingly honest. I think that there's been certain reports about that Harry may not cross a line with the king, but his brother will come in for a bit of a roasting. I think the relationship between them is certainly at rock bottom. Many people suggesting now that it will never be able to recover, and I think it shows just how far in the gutter that relationship is because of certain things that Harry and Meghan have said that there probably will be no reparation at all for them.
But surely, I mean, how much more can there be? How much more dirty laundry can there be to air? And I mean, how much of this is just sour grapes for the fact that Harry is the second and his brother was the firstborn, and that's just sort of how things work in a royal family?
Well, I think that's certainly the feeling. That's certainly the feeling within the Buckingham Palace camp that they're completely weary of Harry and Meghan's gripes, their groans about their life within the royal family. Let's not forget that they have pretty much got what they wanted. They wanted to leave the royal family. They wanted a half-in, half-out arrangement that they were told that wouldn't and couldn't work. However, they have left. They're living a wonderful life in California. They've earned tens, if not hundreds, of millions of dollars in the corporate world through Netflix and Spotify. And yet here we are once again doing only as though they know how and pretty much slamming the royal family, who they know will not be able to respond publicly. And it's a pretty one-sided affair at the moment.
And I mean, how can the royal family respond when so much of the language that they use is this adopted Californian language of sort of therapy culture and things like that, when the royals will always be arguing with that stoic arm tied behind their back?
Well, you look at the language used, and I think not just in these small clips that we've seen, but this is what Harry and Meghan have been doing. They've been talking in sound bites. You're talking about them being painted as the villains. I mean, every soap opera does need a sort of a good side and a bad side, and that is exactly the sort of language that Harry is tapping into. Also talking about silence is betrayal. I mean, whether he knows or not, I mean, perhaps I'm giving him too much credit, but he definitely knows that if he keeps on this track, it's going to be picked up, filling the front pages themselves, even though he's bemoaning his treatment from the British media and beyond. And it seems as though this is just the tap that Harry and Meghan have, and then this is the only reason they have to make an awful lot of money, and they're carrying on, keeping on, as it were.
Yeah, I suppose the thing is that just people identify with this because no matter how much money you have or don't have, this is a sort of drama that plays out tragically in so many families all the time. But I want to shift gears a little bit here and ask you, I'm a journalist, I deal with politicians, their offices all the time. You're a journalist, you deal with royals. And I want to ask you, as the royal editor of a British newspaper, what do you say about some of those claims about the palace briefing? Did they ever, I've got to ask you, did they ever brief you against Harry and Meghan?
Well, it's very interesting because this is something that Harry has repeated in these promos, and they raised this this notion that the British media were being spoon-fed stories, and that is a language that Harry used yesterday. Now, the relationships have to exist between journalists and members of the households from the royal family. Indeed, as you well know, James, they have to exist between journalists and members of the political lobby households, be it the White House or Number 10 Downing Street. Now, the issue that I have and many of my colleagues have is that nobody was being called up by members of the household press team and spoon-fed stories. Our jobs would be an awful lot easier if that was actually happening. Of course, there were conversations. Of course, there were briefings about stories that our sources would give us, and we had to go to Buckingham Palace or Kensington Palace to check. But I think it's a complete distortion of the truth to suggest that that was the only way that stories about them were appearing in the press, because it simply wasn't true.
So indeed what you're saying is that it's just simply a naive and deliberate misinterpretation of the normal relationship between journalists and the people and institutions that they cover.
I think so. I think it's definitely a misinterpretation, and I don't really think that Harry and Meghan understand the way that the press work. I mean, we'd already seen in their court case with the Mail on Sunday that there had been necessarily engagement between the press officers that were representing them at the time at Kensington Palace.
Thank you so much. I'm going to have to cut you off there. We've got to go.